Hello, everyone. This is Health Word View or Word for Word Talk, depending where you're watching me from. So I'm just bringing you the breaking news regarding the submersible vessel that was lost at sea on Sunday. Do listen to it and keep the family in prayer.
From the off have been coordinating this search, joined by an international grouping of experts who have had an input, including Royal Navy input in the form of Lieutenant Commander Richard Cantabria. Let's now listen to the news conference.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and over the past few days. This afternoon, Rear Admiral John Mauger will be providing an update on the most recent findings from ROV operations in search of the Titan submersible. He will provide a brief statement and provide the opportunity for questions after. Please limit your questions to one per outlet. Following the briefing, the Joint Information Center staff and I will be here to help you with any of your further needs. May I now please introduce Rear Admiral John Mauger.
This morning, an ROV, or remote operated vehicle, from the vessel Horizon Arctic discovered the tail cone of the Titan submersible approximately 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic on the seafloor. The ROV subsequently found additional debris. In consultation with experts from within the Unified Command, the debris is consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. Upon this determination, we immediately notified the families. On behalf of the United States Coast Guard and the entire Unified Command, I offer my deepest condolences to the families. I can only imagine what this has been like for them, and I hope that this discovery provides some solace during this difficult time. Additionally, we've been in close contact with the British and French Consuls General to ensure that they are fully apprised and that their concerns are being addressed. The outpouring of support in this highly complex search operation has been robust and immensely appreciated. We are grateful for the rapid mobilization of experts on the undersea search and rescue, and we thank all of the agencies and personnel for their role in the response. We're also incredibly grateful for the full spectrum of international assistance that's been provided. The ROVs will remain on scene and continue to gather information. Again, our most heartfelt condolences go out to the loved ones of the crew. We'll now take questions.
John, what other debris have you found? John, what other debris have you found?
Can you talk about the delay in reporting the vessel missing and what impact that had on the recovery? Search and recovery?
This was a incredibly complex case, and we're still working to develop the details for the timeline involved with this casualty and the response. And so we'll provide that.
James Matthews from Sky News. John, what other debris have you found? And have you found any trace of those who were on board?
So this is an incredibly complex environment on the seafloor over 2 miles beneath the surface. And so the remote operating vehicle has been searching, and it is highly capable. And we've been able to classify parts of the pressure chamber for the Titan submersible. Let me refer to one of my undersea experts here, Mr. Paul Hankin, to talk about the nature of some of the debris.
Thank you, Admiral. So essentially, we found 5 different major pieces of debris that told us that it was the remains of the Titan. The initial thing we found was the nose cone, which was outside of the pressure hull. We then found a large debris field. Within that large debris field, we found the front end bell of the pressure hull. That was the first indication that there was a catastrophic event. Shortly thereafter, we found a second smaller debris field. Within that debris field, we found the other end of the pressure hull, the aft end bell, which was basically comprised of the totality of that pressure vessel. We continue to map the debris field, and as the Admiral said, we will do the best we can to fully map out what's down there.
Admiral, is there?
It's a very difficult question to ask, but it will be an important one for the families, of course. What are the prospects of recovering the bodies of the missing?
So the questions was related. I'm restating the question from the standpoint of sometimes it's hard to hear the question here. What are the prospects for recovering crew members? And so this is a incredibly unforgiving environment down there on the seafloor. And the debris is consistent with a catastrophic implosion of the vessel. And so we'll continue to work and continue to search the area down there, but I don't have an answer for prospects at this time.
Admiral, it's Tom Costello at NBC News. Is there any suggestion, any suggestion at all that the sub itself collided with the wreckage of Titanic, or that instead it might have imploded above the wreckage and then rained down nearby?
So the question was, is there any question as to whether or not the sub collided with the Titanic or whether it imploded above and debris field created from that? So the location of the Titan submersible was in an area that was approximately 1,600 feet from the wreck of the Titanic. I have an expert here that is familiar with that area and can talk about the debris field and what the debris field indicates in terms of where the casualty may have occurred.
Rear Admiral, really quickly, can you tell me when that...
Wait, let's get the expert voice, please. Hang on a second. The expert voice is coming up to answer the question.
Thank you, Admiral. So the question is, where does the wreck lie in relation to the Titanic? I didn't hear the Admiral's answer. I think 1,600 feet. Was that correct, Admiral?
Yep, you got it.
So that's off the bow of Titanic. It's in an area where there is not any debris of Titanic. It is a smooth bottom. To my knowledge and anything I've seen, there's no Titanic wreckage in that area. And again, 200 plus meters from the bow, and consistent with the location of last communication for an implosion in the water column. And the size of the debris field is consistent with that implosion in the water column.
Well, if I can ask you a question, in terms of the timing here, you say that this was a catastrophic implosion. And I know it's early on, but is it your estimation that this happened right at the moment when they lost contact, an hour and 45 minutes after their descent?
So the question was about the timing of the catastrophic implosion. Right now, it is too early to tell with that. We know that as we've been prosecuting this search over the course of the last 72 hours and beyond, that we've had sonar buoys in the water nearly continuously and have not detected any catastrophic events when those sonar buoys have been in the water. So.
Admiral, can you describe what happens from here, sir, in the next days and weeks in terms of finding any more debris? What happens from here?
So we will, the question was, what happens from here? What's the next phase? And so right now, again, our thoughts are with the families and making sure that they have an understanding as best as we can provide of what happened and begin to find some closure. In terms of the large process, we're going to continue to investigate the site of the debris field. And then I know that there's also a lot of questions about how, why, and when did this happen. And so, you know, those are questions that we will collect as much information as we can on now, while the governments are meeting and discussing, you know, what an investigation of this nature of a casualty might look like. This is something that happened. I'll just remind everybody. This is something that happened in a remote portion of the ocean with people from, you know, several different countries around the world. And so it is a complex case to work through, but I'm confident that those questions will begin to get answered.
Will the Coast Guard lead the investigation, sir?
From the UK, is there any suggestion that time factors, speed, anything could have prevented this or saved the 5 people on board, or is this quite simply a catastrophic accident?
The question was there any suggestion that time factors may have played a role or a consideration in the casualty here? And so the debris field is consistent with a catastrophic implosion of the vessel. Again, while we were prosecuting the search, we had listening devices in the water throughout and did not hear any signs of catastrophic failure from those. And so we're going to continue to investigate, or we're going to continue to document the information there and understand, based on all the information we have, the timeline.
The resources required for the investigation, which should be spilling out and coming in?
So the question was, what are the resources required for the investigation, and which ships will be pulling out and staying in? And so it's too early for me to talk about an investigation. That's a decision that's going to be taken outside of the search and efforts that I was leading. But we do have a number of vessels. We have 9 vessels on the scene right now. We had medical personnel on scene. We had other technicians on scene. And so we will begin to demobilize personnel and vessels from the scene over the course of the next 24 hours. But we're going to continue remote operations on the seafloor. And I don't have a timeline for when we would intend to stop remote operations on the seafloor at this point.
Admiral, as a result of this, do you think there should be changes in the way these are safety rated or inspected so that this won't happen again?
Yeah, the question was essentially about, do you think that there should be changes in safety ratings or inspection for these standards? I know that there's a lot of questions about why, how, when this happened, and the members of the Unified Command, have those questions too, as professionals and experts that work in this environment. And this is an incredibly difficult and dangerous environment to work in out there. But those questions about the regulations that apply and the standards, that's going to be, I'm sure, focus of future review. Right now, we're focused on documenting the scene and continuing the subfloor.
I know we don't know the timing here. We don't know the timing here, but there was the banging noises yesterday that redirected and redeployed the ROVs to this area. Is there anything conclusive in those noises, and did that redirection and then finding this debris field today all help?
So throughout the search efforts, we reacted to the information that we had available to us. And while we continue to send it off for deeper analysis, again, really complex operating environment for us to work in. Let me check with the experts, but there doesn't appear to be any connection between the noises and the location on the seafloor. Again, this was a catastrophic implosion of the vessel, which would have generated a significant broadband sound down there that the sonar buoys would have picked up.
Admiral, a lot of questions about who might be.
Admiral, you mentioned closure for the families. Admiral, can I just ask you about your comment regarding the families?
They dropped into the ocean today. It arrived early this morning. It seems that Swiftly was able to find it and rebuild. We talked about the speed of that. And also, were all of the assets involved moved as swiftly as possible to the area? And was any help turned away, as some lawmakers have criticized the government?
This was a incredibly complex operation, and we were able to mobilize an immense amount of gear to the site in just a really remarkable amount of time, given the fact that we started without any sort of vessel response plan for this or any sort of pre-stage resources. And so the equipment that was brought on site this morning that we were using was a pelagic ROV capable of operating at 6,000 meters, cameras, sonar, other articulating arms and resources on it. And it, we had to transport it here through C-17 aircraft. This is 2 aircraft that it took to get this up here. And so we've really had the right gear on site and worked as swiftly as possible to bring all of the capabilities that we had to bear to this search and rescue effort. And it was just a huge international and interagency effort to make this happen. So I'm really grateful for all of the responders that came out to support this and really search for the vessel. It is a difficult day for all of us, and it's especially difficult for the families, and our thoughts are with the families today. But this was an immense support, and we had the right gear on the bottom to find it. So thank you.
Admiral, you mentioned Admiral.
Will you attempt to recover the bodies, can we ask you, though? The victims, will they be recovered?
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this afternoon. There are no future planned press conferences. Updates will be shared to the...
Well, we've been listening there to Rear Admiral John Mauger, the 1st Coast Guard District Commander, bringing the news that the Titan submersible debris field that was found earlier is in fact the submersible, and that it was destroyed in what was consistent with an implosion. The debris field found some 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic. When asked whether or not the bodies of those who were on board, those 5 individuals, would be recovered, he was unable to say because of the nature of the implosion of that Titan submersible. Let's bring in our international correspondent, John Sparks, who's been following this for us from St John's in Newfoundland, from where this voyage began. And John, we've had the details there from John Mauger, the details, I guess, that families feared hearing, but which perhaps they had expected.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a lot of information that was given in that press conference, and we can go over it quickly in a second. But he said, look, difficult day for all of us, and an especially difficult day for members of the family. He was absolutely categorical. That vessel has been lost. It suffered a catastrophic rupture, a catastrophic implosion. The 5 men on board have lost their lives. They are dead. It was categorical, sad, but categorical. Let's go through some of the details. They put an ROV, one of these remote deep sea vehicles. They put it in the sea this morning from a ship called the Horizon Arctic. I understand that ROV was supplied by the US Navy. It gave them the ability to get right to the bottom of the ocean floor. It gave them eyes on the bottom of the ocean floor, and that is the first time they've had that skill, they've had that ability, and I think that's what's generated the news and their findings. With that ROV, they were able to find this. They found a field of debris. It started with a nose cone, the nose cone of the submersible, the Titan. They then found a debris field, the first debris field, past the nose cone. They then found the front of the pressure hull. I assume that is the main part of the structure. They then found a second debris field, and then they found more debris. And they found it 1,600 feet from the wreck. That is relatively close to the wreck of the Titanic. Off the bow, said one of the experts, it was in a smooth part of the ocean floor. There was no other debris from the Titanic there. It suggests they would have had a clear look at it. They are absolutely certain of what they were looking at. As you said, they were asked about the bodies. What are you going to do about the bodies? And they weren't able to give an answer. That will certainly be a question that will be asked again. Friends and family of those who have been lost, they will want to know as well. But it is an incredibly complex operation, as we were told multiple times, and it remains so. It remains a complicated operation. Very, very difficult to search 4 kilometers underneath the ocean, recovering parts of the structure, recovering bodies will be a very difficult thing to do. But absolutely certain about what happened, an implosion. I think one fascinating thing that came through that press conference, they were asked by journalists about the timings. Do they know when this happened? And what we heard was that the sonar buoys that were put in the water didn't pick up an implosion. It didn't pick up any sort of explosion. Those buoys would have gone in the water on Monday, about 24 hours roughly after the Polar Star, the ship, the supply ship that put the submersible into the water on Sunday morning, after it reported it missing. That was Sunday evening. We know the Canadian patrol flights then went out the next day. They put these sonar buoys in. So we heard from that press conference that those sonar buoys did not pick up any sound of an explosion. That suggests that this happened early on. This happened early on after the submersible Titan was put into the water. I would suggest within 24 hours of it going into the water, so early on, not later. And the effects would have been absolutely catastrophic, as we heard. Again, a couple of questions about what comes next, and the experts said, look, this is early days, but clearly there will be an investigation. There needs to be a complete rethink about this form of what is adventure tourism. You have scientists and adventurers, but you also have very wealthy individuals who are able to purchase seats now on structures like this. This was This was probably, as far as I know, this was the first corporate offering these sort of trips. But as we heard in that press conference, it's very difficult to do anything when people get themselves into trouble. So I think we're going to see a detailed investigation, and we're going to have a long conversation about what happens next. This particular submersible, it hadn't been classified, it hadn't been certified by any agency or regulatory body. It was essentially an experimental vessel. It was made of wound carbon fiber with titanium ends. There were complaints by industry insiders about it. They said it wasn't tested. Again, we're going to have a lot of conversation now about what comes next in terms of regulation and rules and protocols before another company or other individuals put a vessel like this in the water. So that will come in the days and the weeks ahead. But what we have heard at that press conference is absolutely categorical. An implosion, a rupture that was catastrophic. The debris fields, and it is debris fields plural, 2 debris fields plus critical parts of the structure that have been identified on the ocean floor. No evidence of the 5 men on board, but clearly they have lost their lives. And they were categorical about that. So, yeah, it's not what anybody wanted to hear, but it is definite.
Okay. John in St John's in Newfoundland, appreciate that, John, there, reiterating what we heard in that press conference from John Mauger, that there was a catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. Rear Admiral John Mauger saying that upon that determination, they immediately notified the families of those 5 men on board. Hamish Harding, Stockton Rush, Shahzada Daoud and his son Suleiman Daoud, and Paul-Henri Nargiole. Let's bring in now, if we can, David Russell, a former Royal Navy submariner, who was actually in charge of the British response to the Kursk submarine disaster back in 2000. David Russell, good to have you with us this evening. Thank you for your time. So look, we've heard some of the details there, and we've heard that the investigation will continue. A catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. Just explain to us what that actually means has happened to that vessel.
Well, I think what we heard was that there were pieces of debris which were from the fairings, that's these bits outside the pressure hull. That wouldn't necessarily be catastrophic. The pressure hull itself is the capsule within which the crew sit. And it's that pressure hull which has to withstand the pressure that you experience at 4,000 meters. And it seemed to me to be unambiguous in the Admiral's statement that the evidence suggests that there was a catastrophic implosion, a failure of that pressure hull, which means, I'm afraid, that instantaneously the lives of those on board would have been lost.
And not to be too mawkish about it, Mr. Russell, but it would be mercifully instantaneous, would it?
Oh, yes, yes.
Now, they said that those remotely operated vehicles are going to continue the search. I mean, what are they looking for at this point? The debris is there. The Rear Admiral is very clear that they don't think they're going to find the 5 people on board or parts of them. So how does the search continue?
Well, I think the people will want to know what caused that failure. I mean, this operation, this submersible, I understand, has operated at this depth many times. It may be that we need to know the nature of the failure in order to make sure that we don't have a problem like this again. So was it merely the cycling, the number of times it's dived to that depth? All of those kind of questions will be made a lot easier to answer if they can collect the remnants of the vessel for expert analysis. It will take time to work that out. But I think that's probably what they will try and do, is collect as much of that physical evidence as possible to enable the analysis to take place.
I mean, Mr. Russell, you obviously worked on the British response to the Kursk disaster, very different disasters, of course. But what sort of lessons do you think can be learnt from the investigation into that situation that could perhaps be used in this one?
Well, with the Kursk, it's really quite different. The major problem that they had here in the Titanic, we already knew the location of the Kursk. So that problem was not our first problem. The most important problem was time. It is always time in submarine rescue operations. You need to get to the scene as quickly as you can. Sounds to me like they did a wonderful job to get as much stuff there as quickly as they did, hundreds of miles off the coast. And then the other thing that we had in the Kursk that fortunately wasn't an issue here was the political will, the unified command to get on and do everything we could to save the people on board. There were lots of issues that the Russians really didn't want us to help, perhaps. But here, at least, there was a combined effort to save the people.
And it's just worth reminding our viewers as we look at these pictures from the year 2000 of what happened with the Kursk, a Russian nuclear-powered submarine that suffered a catastrophic implosion. And for many days, weeks, perhaps, information was kept from investigators.
Yeah, I mean, what actually happened was a torpedo exploded, we think, caught fire and exploded in the torpedo compartment. That set fire to the other torpedoes, which exploded. And there wasn't much left of the Kursk, except a couple of compartments after the reactor compartments. So in that after section, we think there were survivors. We know there were survivors. They kept a record. And the rescue effort was to try and get them out and to the surface. And it's totally different to do that in a submarine at 260 feet, relatively shallow, than in a submersible at 4,000 meters. I mean, that is not the kind of operation we could do there. So, yeah, completely different circumstances, but one or two similarities about, people go to sea in ships and submarines and risk their lives for one reason or another. And sometimes these terrible accidents happen.
So now the work continues, of course, to go through that debris field and see what evidence can be brought up. But with the sort of amount of pressure and the destruction that may well have been caused to it, how difficult is it going to be able to put your finger on one thing that may well have gone wrong with a vessel like this?
Well, I think the working hypothesis will be that the accident occurred pretty much when they lost contact, that the submersible was going to its operating depth, and simply that there was a fracture, a failure of that pressure hull. So the focus, I would imagine, will be around the nature of that pressure hull and its connections to the titanium domes at either end, and what, if anything, failed. And it's the important thing is to try and analyse what failed, what went wrong, so that in future construction projects of this kind, we can learn lessons from it. Because I don't know much about this particular vessel, except to say I think it was a unique design, and it may be that we can learn lessons for future designs by learning what happened, what went wrong with this one.
Yeah, unique design wasn't certified as well, and the company themselves admitted that on their website. I do wonder with the debris field, Mr. Russell, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, the way that the debris is found on the ocean floor, will that offer any clues as to anything? Or with the sort of the tides down there, will everything have been mixed up and so you can't really draw too much information from where things are found?
I'm not sure, to be honest. It depends exactly on the conditions and everything else. I wouldn't have thought it would be it won't be unhelpful if you can have a map of where everything is found. That's always going to help in the same way that aircraft disasters are analysed in that way. So I would imagine that would be useful. But I think my personal guess is that it's the materials themselves and their structure and how on analysis and examination, if we can get those pieces back, the real experts, the scientists who will look into it, will be able to say, and this was why it failed. And I think, as I say, that's important for future constructions.
Okay. David Russell, who was in charge of the British response to the Kursk submarine disaster. Do appreciate your expertise this evening, Mr. Russell. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Now, in the past hour or so, the owners of the Titan OceanGate Incorporated have released a statement, and it reads as follows. We now believe that our CEO Stockton Rush, Shahzada Daoud and his son Suleiman, Hamish Harding and Paul-Henri Nargeolet have been sadly lost. These men were true explorers who shared a distinct spirit of adventure and a deep passion for exploring and protecting the world's oceans. Our hearts are with these 5 souls and every member of their families during this tragic time. We grieve the loss of life and joy they brought to everyone they knew. He goes on. This is an extremely sad time for our dedicated employees who are exhausted and grieving deeply over this loss. The entire OceanGate family is deeply grateful for the countless men and women from multiple organisations of the international community who expedited wide-ranging resources and have worked so very hard on this mission. We appreciate their commitments to finding these 5 explorers and their days and nights of tireless work in support of our crew and their families. And it concludes, this is a very sad time for the entire explorer community and for each of the family members of those lost at sea. We respectfully ask that the privacy of these families be respected during this most painful time. The statement there from OceanGate, the company that owns the Titan. Now, there of course were 3 Britons on the Titan submersible, and the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly has issued a statement in the past few moments. He says the UK government is closely supporting the families affected and expresses our deepest condolences. Now, James Cleverly there expressing the UK government's condolences for the loss of those British citizens, Hamish Harding, Shahzada Daoud and his son Suleiman. Now, of course, we're going to have more on this story and the investigation which will now ensue into exactly what happens to that Titan.
Well, it's a sad ending for us, which we didn't really expect, but also, unfortunately, that's what has happened. Keep the family in prayer, and there's nothing else to say. It's sad. It's not what we expected. It's not what we were looking for, pray for, but God knows everything. And just our condolences to the family and friends of these 5 people that have lost their life at sea. More to talk about this vessel that was used. This, maybe that will be on a different video. We just kind of discuss it. And I'm going to post a video that actually give you more information about what is how the Titan look like. I mean, or the vessel used, the submersible that was used to go on this voyage. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to post it and then talk about it. That will give you an idea, overview of what it's really like in there, the toilet, everything. Is going to let you, give you more details on it. So expect that video to be posted maybe soon. Thank you so much for joining. Have a wonderful day and God bless you. Bye.